All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to talk about something that feels like it's touching every single part of our lives right now, from our politics all the way down to how we just talk to each other. We're talking about the very idea of truth and the crisis it seems to be in.
I mean, you've probably heard this question, right? It's everywhere. You see it in the news, you probably even talk about it with friends. It really feels like the ground is shifting under our feet. So, is this just a weird feeling we all have, or is something fundamental, something big, actually changing in how we relate to what's real?
Well, researchers actually have a name for this whole thing. They call it truth decay. And look, it's not that truth has just up and vanished. It's more like our collective agreement to care about it is kind of falling apart. Think about it. We're disagreeing more and more about basic facts. The line between what's an opinion and what's a fact is getting super blurry. And let's be honest, there's way less trust in the places we used to go for information.
And this is not just some abstract, philosophical thing to debate in a classroom. No way. The Rand Corporation has looked into this, and the consequences are, well, they're real and they're pretty severe. We're talking about our public discourse getting toxic, our political systems just grinding to a halt, and that slow erosion of trust in everything, science, government, you name it. These are the pillars that are supposed to hold everything up.
Okay, so if we want to get to the bottom of how things can get so bad, how conversations get so toxic, and institutions start to feel shaky, we've got to go back to square one. We have to ask the big question. What even is this thing we call truth that feels like it's under attack? And the second you ask that question, bam, you've just walked straight into a massive philosophical tug-of-war that's been going on for literally centuries. Is truth this solid, unchanging thing out there for everyone, or is it relative? Does it change depending on your point of view?
So this whole debate really boils down to two big teams. In one corner, you've got team absolutism, or objectivism. Their whole thing is, facts are facts, period. It doesn't matter what you feel or what I believe. Truth is just out there, waiting for us to find it. But in the other corner, you've got team relativism. They'd say, hold on a second. They argue that truth is something we build. It's shaped by our culture, our language, our own unique experiences.
All right, let's dig a little deeper into this. You can see here how these ideas kind of exist on a spectrum. You've got absolutism on one end, searching for that one single universal truth. Then you've got relativism, which says, well, it depends on the context. And you can take that even further, all the way to subjectivism, where truth is basically just what's true for you right now, in this moment.
So, okay, it's one thing to debate what truth is in theory, but how do we actually figure out what's true in the real world? Well, lucky for us, philosophers have come up with a kind of toolkit, 3 classic ways to try and sort fact from fiction. First up, we've got the one that probably makes the most sense to us all right off the bat, the correspondence theory. It's super simple. A statement is true if it corresponds to reality. If I say there's a cat on the mat, that's true only if you can go and see an actual cat sitting on an actual mat. It's a straight-up match between my words and the world.
But here's where it gets a little weird. The correspondence theory hits a snag with certain things. Think about this. The statement, vampires do not exist, is true, right? But what fact in the world does it correspond to? You can't point to the absence of a vampire, see? Describing something that isn't there makes that simple word-to-world match suddenly pretty tricky. Okay, so that little problem leads us to our next tool in the kit, the coherence theory. This one works differently. Instead of looking out at the world to check for facts, it looks inward at our own system of beliefs. The idea here is that something is true if it fits perfectly with everything else you already believe. It's got to be logical, no contradictions, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, where every single piece just clicks into place.
But you can probably see the giant hole in this one, right? What happens if your perfectly coherent puzzle is a picture of something that's not real? You could write an incredibly detailed fantasy novel where everything makes perfect sense within that world. But that doesn't mean dragons are suddenly going to start flying around outside your window. The whole system can be perfectly consistent, but totally disconnected from reality. It's the ultimate echo chamber.
So, if matching reality can be tricky and just being internally consistent isn't enough, what's left? Well, that brings us to the third option, pragmatism. And this one is all about, well, being pragmatic. To put it simply, for a pragmatist, the truth is what works. A belief is true if, in the long run, it helps you navigate the world successfully. You measure truth by its practical results.
And here's a really key point, especially from a guy named Charles Sanders Peirce. For him, truth isn't something you can just hold in your hand right now.
It's more like a destination way off in the future. It's the final opinion that everyone who investigates a topic would eventually agree on if they could just keep investigating forever. So it's not a thing you have, it's a process you're in.
Okay, so we have our three tools. But this brings up a really important question. Is all truth created equal? I mean, does the word true mean the exact same thing when we're talking about a math problem versus a scientific theory or an argument about what's right and wrong?
And as you can see here, the answer is a big, fat no. They're totally different. Take math. A mathematical truth is true because it's logically consistent inside its own set of rules. It's rock solid, but only within that system. Then jump over to science. Scientific truth is always kind of provisional, isn't it? It's our best working model based on the evidence we have now, but it could always change with new data. And then you get to ethics. And whoa, that's where the nature of truth itself is the whole debate. We're right back to that battle between team absolutism and team relativism.
Okay, let's take all this philosophical stuff and plug it directly back into what's happening today, because this is where it gets really interesting. What happens when influential thinkers come along and say, you know what, this whole search for objective truth is a waste of time? Or even worse, what if they say it's actually a tool used by the powerful to control people?
This is where a philosopher named Michel Foucault really shook things up. He argued that truth isn't something we just find out there in the world. He said it's produced. Institutions, think about science, medicine, the government, they create what he called discourses of truth as a way to wield power. For example, by being the ones who get to define what's normal or sane or criminal, they're not just describing reality, they're actively shaping it and controlling us.
And then there's Friedrich Nietzsche. He took it a step further. He basically said that our desire to find the truth, what he called the will to truth, is just a mask. And underneath that mask, our real fundamental drive, the will to power. So when we're running around claiming to be searching for objective facts, Nietzsche would say we're really just trying to make our own perspective, our own values, the dominant ones. So let's bring it back to today. What happens when an entire society starts to absorb these ideas? When we functionally give up on the idea of objective truth? Well, the practical, real-world costs are absolutely devastating. You can't have political compromise if you can't even agree on a basic set of facts. Narratives and propaganda become the weapons of choice. We lose trust in the referees, the courts, the media, science. And how are you supposed to solve huge, complex problems if you can't even agree on what the problem is?
I mean, the stakes here are just incredibly high. So that leads us to the last and maybe the most crucial question of all. After seeing all this, what is our role? What's our personal responsibility in this whole mess?
You know, it's interesting. If you look across so many different philosophies and ethical traditions, there's this recurring, powerful idea that we have a moral obligation to seek truth. It's not just a hobby or a preference. It's framed as a fundamental duty. Without it, how do you get justice? How do you correct mistakes? How do you make any progress at all? It's presented as an absolute must.
And right there, that's where we hit a really tricky modern paradox. On the one hand, we have this obligation to know, right? This ethical duty to be informed citizens so we can make good decisions. But on the other hand, we also have what's called a right not to know. The right to say no thanks to certain information to protect ourselves, our privacy, our peace of mind. And that tension, that pull between our duty to know and our right not to, that's a huge part of living in the world today.
So when you put it all together, it becomes pretty clear that truth isn't some simple thing you just find like a rock on the ground. It's a process. It's messy, it's difficult, it's ongoing. It takes hard work, a little humility, and a real commitment to some kind of shared standards. So maybe the big question we should be leaving with isn't just what is truth. Maybe the real question is, for you, for all of us, how will you choose to participate in that process?